What if the deep state declared war on Americans and deleted hundreds, if not thousands of them in the last couple of weeks? What would you do? What would you think? It's a heavy question. In my other videos, I talked about how we are already in World War III. If China released a certain something back in 2020 on purpose, then we're at war. So if the deep state has released a weapon of war on us in the form of hurricanes, what would you think about that? What would you do? It's a serious question, and it's raised in this next video here. Let's check it out.
Thank you for your continued attention to what's occurring in our skies. Nothing short of all-out weather warfare at this point. We can speculate about the agendas and objectives being carried out, but the fact that these storms are absolutely being manipulated and steered is inarguable. The denial of this fact is absolutely ludicrous at this point. We know the U.S. military and others around the globe, but U.S. military has been engaged in these operations since 1947, Project Cirrus. How far have they come since that point? So the cyclones are being kept weakened over water with manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones. And once they're near enough to the land-based network of frequency transmitters, the NexRad network, they are steered. And that steering is incredibly inarguable if we look at the animation of the frequency transmissions and their interaction with the storm, in this case, Hurricane Helene. We recorded that, and that video, if we can roll that now, the interaction is absolutely inarguable.
Result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NexRad network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
The bottom line is it was directed there, as the transmission recordings clearly show. They kept that moisture corralled there to deluge in the same location. So again, these are patented technologies, and the fact that we have the entire so-called meteorological community denying that this is going on to protect their paychecks and pensions is absolutely criminal at this point. We know we have private defense contractors that are neck deep in the patents that manipulate these storms, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. We know those two in particular do the weather modeling for the nation's weathermen, National Weather Service and NOAA. Again, both agencies have an illegal federal gag order on them. So at this point, this is an emperor has no clothes moment. That's the best description I can give for something that is so blatantly obvious and inarguable, can only be considered weather warfare at this point. And the fact that, again, the so-called science community is denying this manipulation is criminal. It's absolutely criminal, Colonel McGregor.
Why do you think the Asheville area in particular turned out to be a target? Does it have anything to do with the mining operations there for lithium or quartz? Is that just coincidental? I'm just curious. Again, people in Asheville are asking these questions. They're trying to find a rationale for why they ended up being in the middle of this.
Well, certainly it's hard to call anything a coincidence at this point, isn't it? I mean, we have so many agendas and objectives being carried out with every action of the military-industrial complex and the money printer bankers that fund them and control them ultimately. And we have a cyclonic rotation like this that does that kind of decimation inland. And yet we have in the record warm Gulf of Mexico, nothing develops, nothing spins or damages the oil infrastructure there. Why is that? We see those Any rotation that comes anywhere near the oil infrastructure is immediately broken up. Yet we have this type of scenario happening inland. So again, once you interfere with the climate system, the entire system becomes derailed, and we have a global network interfering with the system. We have documents at geoengineeringwatch.org, some hundreds of pages long, some nearly 1,000 pages long, documenting the international cooperation in these programs, even between otherwise adversarial nations. So again, they will try to hide and deny these programs until the last possible hour, Colonel McGregor, because if the public realizes the entire weather system has been derailed and is being manipulated, and no weather cataclysm can then be said to be natural, which means that you can't deny the connection of climate engineering for any event anywhere, the liability issue is incalculable. And so again, even this one issue that's just happened in the Carolinas, how could you possibly even calculate the liability issue there when hundreds of people are still missing? I believe 100 already officially declared dead, but hundreds still missing. If this issue is brought out into the open, the fur is going to fly, Colonel McGregor.
If you can do so, could you tell us about some of your recent discussions, conversations, briefings that you've had with political leaders from the states in question that have asked you what you think? First of all, what did they specifically ask you, if you can tell us, and how did they respond to your answers?
What if it becomes known that this was engineered and all of the passing aways of everybody in the Asheville area? What if everybody realizes that this is true? And that we're all potential targets, sitting ducks for this type of stuff? What do you think is going to happen? This needs to get out. Please share this. Please, please, please share this.
Yes, Colonel McGregor, I had an hour conference call yesterday with the representatives and senators from the Carolinas, and we presented the data to them to answer their questions about how this manipulation occurs. They realized this was not a natural event. They're trying to digest the fact that their states were literally under assault from weather modification operations that are clearly connected with DoD operations, and we can speculate again on the agendas and objectives being carried out, but the fact that the storm was manipulated is absolutely inarguable. We know that technology to stop these rotations from even occurring has existed for decades with the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones. HAARP in Alaska is one example many people are familiar with. That's an ionosphere heater. That's a weapon of mass destruction, period. It can cause an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere, which heats it to extraordinarily high temperatures, which causes the atmosphere to bulge up and down. The downward push creates a high pressure dome that can steer the jet stream. And the same type of manipulation can create low pressure zones. And when they have this type of power over the climate system, they can make or break these storms anytime they want. And again, what we see now is storms kept weaker as they're over the ocean because they're harder to steer until they reach the land-based network of transmitters. And then we have, Colonel McGregor, rapid intensification. You've heard that term probably a lot lately, because that's how they manipulate these storms. And again, we have Acapulco last October being the extreme example of rapid intensification. An insignificant low pressure system developed into the strongest Cat 5 hurricane to ever hit that part of the world in less than 24 hours, laid waste to Acapulco. And by the way, Hurricane John, which just hit Acapulco again as Hurricane Helene was wreaking havoc in the Carolinas. Not many people know that. So Acapulco just got dealt another blow. So again, how many agendas and objectives are being carried out when we know they can manipulate these storms, and we know they can make or break them anytime they want? And again, I bring up the oil infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico that seems to magically miss any sort of damaging storm again and again and again, while the storms wreak havoc inland and on shorelines. It's not a coincidence. They have that much sway over the storms.
Well, when you highlighted these anomalies to the audience of political leaders, representatives and so forth, how did they react? Did they react with a degree of serious skepticism, or did they take you seriously?
They're in shock. They're in shock. Because when you realize that you're literally at war with those who control the federal government, how does one digest that? And when we go all the way back to, again, as I've referenced many times, 1962, 62 years ago, President Johnson, then stating we had the power to control the world's cloud layer, and he who controls the weather controls the world. We're seeing this happen all over the globe. We're seeing countries like Dubai, as you remember recently, got 2 years worth of rain, 2 years worth in 6 hours, right after they decide to ditch the dollar. Is that a coincidence? We see this kind of event over and over. So climate engineering is the crown jewel weapon of the military industrial complex, because they can and are bringing populations to their knees without those populations ever even knowing they're under assault, and they blame it on nature. That's why this is such a coveted weapon, and they're not about to give it up, even though it's destroying the ozone layer, contaminating the entire planet. Every breath we take is contaminated with climate engineering fallout. Part of that is nanoplastics. Anyone who looks, I challenge your listeners to look, nanoplastic contamination, human organs. We know it's showing up in the brain, all of our organs, and we know there's decomposing plastics in the environment. We're not denying that. But when you have this type of ubiquitous contamination of nanoplastics that appears to be a manufactured particle, that's not just decomposing plastics. So again, this assault is not just environmental. It's a contamination of virtually the entire planet and all of us.
Well, you paint a very grim and frightening picture, and I'm sure that's necessary to get people's attention. Now that you have people's attention and you're talking to an audience inside Our Country, Our Choice, but also this will eventually go out to others, what do you want American citizens to do who are listening to you right now? What do you recommend that they do?
I'm asking them to behave as if they're fighting for their lives, because they are. And I can't take the long way around the barn with this. Just too many people want to pretend there's some happy ending if we just take a few meager steps in a particular direction, or post something on a blog somewhere. We have to absolutely bring this issue out into the full light of day. That's the only chance we have of stopping it from the inside out, so that those participating, and this is so very key, our military brothers and sisters and defense industry families and participants there, so that they understand that they're participating in their own near-term demise. We have to push this issue out into the full light of day, Colonel McGregor. And this issue is connected to so many other lethal immediate threats. For example, the disintegrating ozone layer, and we are getting UVC on the surface now. That's the last spectrum of UV radiation before X-ray. Climate engineering is the core causal factor, not just the sprayed particulates, which cause an oxidative effect on the ozone layer, disintegrating it, but the frequency transmissions that are being used, just like you saw with Hurricane Helene, all of this destroying the ozone layer. Now we're susceptible to a CME, a coronal mass ejection, because we don't have the atmospheric protection. Not only is it frying plants, foliage, insects, plankton, but we're susceptible to a large coronal mass ejection, which would shut down grid power around the globe, which would cause nuclear power plants to not be able to cool themselves. And now we have Fukushima times 100 or 200. So from every conceivable direction, what's happening in our skies holds all of our futures in the near-term balance.
Well, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines know from experience, it's one thing to ask questions and urge action, but it's another to put yourself at severe risk. And unfortunately for them, those of us in uniform right now, they're going to look at this and they're going to say, well, it makes sense to me, but what kind of response am I going to elicit from the chain of command? And historically, the chain of command usually answers, shut up, get back to work. There's not a problem. If there is, we'll let you know. So what about the rest of us, those of us who are not in the active military? What do you want them to do? Can they write congressmen, contact congressmen, senators? How do you want them to go forward with this?
Yes, to start spot fires of awareness. And we have tried to provide those tools at geoengineeringwatch.org. Our groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which includes 2 U.S. Air Force generals testifying that these programs are real and ongoing, former Canadian Minister of Defense, former U.S. presidential cabinet members, former government scientists. That film is the best one-stop tool to introduce this issue, and that link can be emailed to all of the above, all that you just mentioned, elected officials, environmental groups, farm groups, ag organizations, the list is endless, to start a spot fire of awareness. And in spite of draconian social media censorship, our film, The Dimming, is now over 25 million views. People are waking up to this. And again, our printed materials help as well. We pass those on, by the way, for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our only goal, my only goal, is to see this nightmare in our skies exposed fully once and for all and brought to a halt so that the planet can respond on its own to the damage done and not continue to sink with this toxic straitjacket of climate engineering. How many blue skies do you see, Colonel McGregor? Do you see anywhere you're at? Because we don't see any true blue skies here. At best, it's silvery white.
Well, I see some blue skies occasionally, but admittedly, lately we haven't had much. But that I attribute to the rain. Look, this strikes me as an issue that should spread like wildfire on this new platform, social media platform that we have been urging our members to join, called Republic, because Republic is designed under no circumstances to be censored or canceled. In other words, it is a true free speech platform. And if you pay to be on it, then you're free to explore, to speak, to write, to display whatever you think is important for your community. And this is the kind of thing that really needs to reach people at the lowest level in every community, because that's where the change has to come from. Those are the people that can hold people accountable that are either appointed or elected to office. So I hope people will do that, and we'll make that information available to them after this video. And I hope that we get all of the material that you've been discussing on that platform. It's very important. Dane, thank you so much for being with us today. Continue to have God's blessing in the work that you're doing and be successful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel McGregor. And I stress to your listeners, your viewers, that there is no place to hide from what's taking place in our skies. Every breath we take, every bite of food, every drink of water, all of it is absorbing the contamination from what they're doing in our skies, and it's affecting the planet's ability to grow crops, forests, fisheries. They're all collapsing. Many causal factors. We've been bad stewards of the planet, but there's nothing that compares with what they're doing intentionally in our skies. So thank you and your staff and your platform for helping us to sound the alarm. With climate engineering, we have, for example, a KC-135 military tanker can distribute 100 tons of toxic material into the skies to seed cloud moisture in a single payload. So they're two very different animals, and the local publicized weather modification operations are simply used as a smokescreen to mask the unimaginably larger climate intervention operations. So, and again, we have, going back decades, congressional documents at geoengineeringwatch.org. One is 800 pages long, outlining the scope and scale of these operations, even going back to the 70s and before, and the intergovernmental cooperation, even between governments with otherwise adversarial relations, is stated as such in this document. Document calls for blanket legal immunity for anyone and everyone involved with these programs. So again, we have film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, turning on and off. This is not condensation we see in our skies. All military tankers and all commercial aircraft are outfitted with a high bypass turbofan jet engine, jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through that engine is not combusted. So we should see, except under rare circumstances, we should see nothing behind these aircraft. And we're just asking people to investigate the data, connect the dots. This is absolutely ongoing. If we look at what the Washington Post published all the way back in 1977, the U.S. military had conducted no less than 239 open-air biological tests on innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians. That's what we know about going back that far. If we look at the nuclear bomb detonations in Nevada, we have peer-reviewed study now to prove that those detonations eventually caused no less than 500,000 downstream deaths from the fallout for U.S. civilians. That's peer-reviewed study. So again, for those that can't imagine that the people who actually control our government, which I would argue is not any elected official, it's those who control the flow of money, this is business as usual. And why wouldn't they do this? Why wouldn't they use weather as a covert weapon of control? If we look all the way back, Clayton, to film footage of Lyndon Johnson in 1962, former U.S. President Lyndon Johnson, 1962, on film, on the record, ranting like a lunatic, stating we had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, 62 years ago, and quote, "He who controls the weather controls the world." So again, this is not speculation. And we have other governments like China openly announcing their massive weather modification operations. And yet if you bring the subject up here in the US, suddenly you're marginalized. That needs to change. In regards to Milton, there's no question it's being manipulated. And there's a global network of frequency transmitters that have a repelling effect on the air mass that is heavily seeded with electrically conductive elements. And if you saw the track of Milton, it got hung up a bit on the Yucatan Peninsula. There's a massive transmitter in Cancun, and we recorded the transmissions from that, trying to bump that storm back onto track. And again, once it gets near enough to landfall in the US, where the NEXRAD network then becomes the controlling element, we've recorded this again and again and again. Even with hurricanes like Harvey, for example, Clayton, you might remember 7 days in advance, they seemed to know where it was going to go and that it was going to sit there for days. How could they possibly know that unless that's the plan? And we recorded Harvey. We recorded the actual transmissions with Harvey, Ian, Maria, Michael, all these hurricanes and their interaction with the transmitters. This is patented technology. So again, it's not like we're speculating.
Wow. Fukushima times 100 or 200. So let's look at this like adults with common sense. Let's look at all the catastrophes that happened. A year or so ago, the train derailed into the Ohio River, spilling chemicals. That same area was being tested to chip people so the deep state could keep track of them. Then in the spring of this year, a oil tanker smashes into a bridge. So again, two disasters that look like accidents but really are not. And that's a Ukrainian captain that does that, by the way. And when we look at that video, it's highly suspect. That ship, it's got to have redundant systems to avoid that happening. Why was there not a pilot ship? Then we see Maui happen. Maui was going to be a smart city. We see police blocking people from leaving, no horns, water's turned off. Smart city, that's supposed to be a smart city. We see Mansion Row is fine, but all the houses are destroyed around it. They build walls around that area so people can't go in there and investigate. We see that blue houses and blue drums don't catch on fire, but everything else does. Then we've got these hurricanes. Even before all Milton and Helene hit, I had said that it's an election year, so there's going to be more hurricanes. Because people probably don't remember, in October of 2020, a few days before Halloween, New Orleans got smashed with a hurricane that really screwed up everything just before the election there. It seems like every time there's an election year, there's problems. Then we've got Helene. We just saw the video of the radars guiding that thing. You could see them all turning on so it wouldn't go west. Then when it was exactly where it wanted to be, they all turned on around it to keep it there. They got deluged. Structure breaking down there. There's a video I did of spikes in the water before the thing. It's like a frequency thing. Go check out my last couple videos on this. And then Milton, same thing. We see it start up in the same area as the Gulf, not the regular path that the hurricanes take from across the Atlantic, from the western coast of Africa all the way across. Just build in the Gulf. Don't hit any oil structures, like he was saying. And then hits Tampa Bay, direct hit. Asheville and Tampa Bay both get direct hit. Asheville and Tampa Bay, just like Maui, was slated to be a smart city. And if you've got lithium and quartz mining that's being halted by the people there, you see what's going on here. The deep state wants to start a war. That's why they try to delete Trump a few times. They want war. They've got lots of money in the Ukraine invested, and they are trying to send troops over to the Middle East. Trump will come in and stop stop all the war, and all their billions will not be made, and they'll lose their money that they've spent in Ukraine, on and on and on. They don't want Trump in, so they're doing everything they can. As soon as, not only did Asheville get hit, but then the North Carolina Voting Commission changed the voting rules again. They don't have a, so now they're trying to do this. They're using this to stop, to again have mail-in ballots. So now we can have more shenanigans in an all red area of the country. They don't want Trump. They've put up Kamala Harris without any kind of anybody voting for her at all. Democrats, Republicans, anybody. Let me ask you this. What if just before the election, a certain video from one of P. Diddy's parties leaks out, and we see a Kamala Harris in one of these things, and it's bad, and she's going to lose? What do you think is going to happen then? If this is true, if they have been waging war on these areas and purposely deleting people, what do you think they're going to? This is in regards to the election as well. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to, if let's say people start getting that video and want to put it all over the place, they're going to crash the internet. They're going to crash the whole grid. And then they got the solar flare excuse as to why it all went down. If I were you guys, I would prepare. I would get, I just did a video. FBI agent said that everybody should get 3 or 4 months worth of food. Arm yourself. He says, arm yourself, make friends with your neighbors, do mutual aid packs, and have food ready. If, and the reason why I mention this is because Hillary Clinton brought this up in a interview recently. She said, oh, there's probably going to be something that's going to come up about Kamala just before the election. If something happens and their candidate is going to not win, what are they going to do? They're going to shut down the internet so that this video doesn't get out, and they're going to shut everything down. I can't. The chances of there being an election are pretty slim, and we already see they're waging war against us. So if I were you, I'd prepare. I'd start. We need to share this video. We need everybody to see what's going on. I'm absolutely disgusted, and you should be too. And we've got to tell everybody about this. So please share, like, and subscribe. I do not get. I don't make a single red cent off of these videos. I only get paid in likes and subscribes. So please share this with your friends and family, and we'll see you on the next Ultra Top Secret. This is what we will be covering for the next foreseeable future. I've got all kinds of videos about this event coming out because we are at war, and we have been for a long time.